This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Morton Dean in St. Louis, Bob Evans in Chicago, and Dan Rather in New York.
Good evening. From Washington, Paris, and Saigon tonight, there were new reports of some sort of progress toward a peace in Vietnam, starting specifically with a total halt to the bombing of the North. Ambassador Ellsworth Bunker met 3 times, secretly and urgently, with South Vietnamese President Thieu in Saigon. And sources from both sides said a bombing pause had been discussed. After another negotiating session in Paris, U.S. spokesman William Jordan said there has been movement in the talks, but he added he cannot characterize it as progress. President Johnson went to extraordinary lengths by telephoning the major presidential candidates to tell them that there has been no breakthrough in the efforts toward peace. But as CBS News White House correspondent Dan Rather reports, there could be a dramatic announcement soon.
President Johnson is attempting to complete an arrangement for a complete bombing halt in North Vietnam. An apparent lull in the fighting in South Vietnam is seen as possibly the opening for which Mr. Johnson has been seeking. However, and high-ranking sources are adamant on this point, while Mr. Johnson may be near a deal to stop the bombing soon, that deal is not yet wrapped up. The United States is believed to have offered recently in Paris a secret 3-point formula under which the president felt bombing could be halted. The formula reportedly involved a suspension of enemy terror attacks on South Vietnamese cities, a pullback of North Vietnamese forces from the demilitarized zone, and Hanoi agreeing that the Saigon government be included in peace talks. That last point is considered by far the most difficult for the North Vietnamese. The North Vietnamese, according to sources among U.S. allies, still have not agreed to at least one of these provisions. Which one is not clear. So while Mr. Johnson is hopeful of announcing a total bombing halt soon, he is not certain that he will be able to do so. And as usual, when such delicate negotiations are underway, he is disappointed that so much speculation has erupted. Walter?
At a news conference in Chicago, Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen commented on the reports of an imminent bombing halt.
Several weeks ago, when the first rumblings of a breakthrough took place, that I went down and had a long talk with the president. I said, now, I've been in your corner, and I think I'm entitled to know if anything is developing in this field, and I think you ought to tell me when it happens, or before it happens. Well, he said, you certainly have been in my corner. I said, all right, do we shake on it? And he said, yes, sir. So I rely completely on the president. If there's going to be a development, to get me on the phone somehow, they get me, whether I'm on the top of the Rocky Mountains, and get word.
Senator, that there is no development?
What if George Christian said there's no change?
Well, Senator,
then, of course, there's no change.
George Christian is, of course, the White House news secretary. The general lull in Vietnam ground fighting continued today, but the U.S. command reports enemy forces shelled the Thong Duc area yesterday and then tried to storm a government outpost. American Marines, while providing protective fire, accidentally shelled a village, killing 10 South Vietnamese civilians. Robert Comer, the #1 U.S. advisor to South Vietnam's pacification program, said today the country has almost completely recovered from the 2 enemy offensives this year. He termed it a major success of the Thieu government. Comer said some 100,000 homes have been repaired or rebuilt, and food is now abundant. In short, he added, the economy is moving.
You don't see many wild stallions anymore. No, you don't see many wild stallions anymore. And even if he did run off 3 of your best mares, he's one of the last of a wild and very singular breed. Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
This fine razor isn't made by Persona. It's made by a competitor. But to get the best shave with it, use the new electro-coated Persona blade. Maybe someday we'll make the best razor, but for now, we'll settle for the best blade, the electro-coated Persona.
President Johnson's conference telephone call on Vietnam to the candidates found Richard Nixon in Kansas City, George Wallace in Los Angeles, and Hubert Humphrey in St. Louis. Morton Dean reports from St. Louis.
Politicians find themselves in the strangest of places. Humphrey received his call behind this door in a hallway leading to the men's room. Following the call, the candidate, last night gleeful and glib after the best day of the campaign, now was grumpy and taut, perhaps miffed being but one party on a conference call that included candidates Nixon and Wallace, too. Minutes later, someone in the audience asked Humphrey about the Vietnam rumors.
One can't conceal what transpires. I was held from the stage for some time. The White House this morning has issued a statement setting forth what are the facts. And the proper authorities in the White House wanted us to know, when I say us, we candidates, to know what that statement was. And I was waiting for a conference call that permitted the three candidates for president to hear the same thing at the same time over the same telephone, so that we would not be saying different things. I'll only say that Mr. George Christian, the White House press secretary, speaking in behalf of the president, has stated what the situation is, and that anything that I say, anything today, if I should stutter for a moment, there are theologians on Vietnam that will write a whole new story about it. For me, at this stage, to say anything further would add only to the confusion which you already have. We've got more self-appointed presidents and secretaries of state and ambassadors than any 10 countries in the world.
At his next stop in downtown St. Louis, Humphrey, for the first time in quite a while, failed to mention the war. Morton Dean, CBS News, with the Humphrey campaign in St. Louis.
Nixon today announced plans for creation of a new government agency to serve youth, and in his words, its byword will be challenge, not handout. In the first of a new series of nationwide radio broadcasts, Nixon called upon Americans to worry about youth. We can handle the wild-eyed, he said, but the greater danger is from those who simply do not care at all, from the bored and alienated and disengaged. His proposed youth service agency, Nixon continued, would be aimed at challenging those who, quote, think the way to make a mark in life is to scrawl a slogan on the wall.
You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier in a Playtex Cross Your Heart bra. Its secret? This Playtex shaping crosses your heart with stretch to lift and separate. You're suddenly shapelier in a Playtex Cross Your Heart bra. You'll see. Get one and pass the word. You're suddenly shapelier. You're suddenly shapelier.
Hello.
Mr. Snitzer, what is your opinion about...
How do you do? Nice to see you.
Mrs. Snitzer, how do you feel after the strenuous campaigning?
My girdle is killing me.
Excuses.
She needs the new 18-hour girdle by Playtex. It's made from a remarkable new fabric Playtex just invented. A delicate webbing with the strength to hold you firm all day. The first firm control girdle that's comfortable for hours. The new 18-hour girdle by Playtex.
Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union tonight signed a treaty in Prague legalizing the stay of Soviet troops in Czechoslovakia. Premier Kosygin signed for the Soviets after flying in from Moscow and receiving a rather chilly reception at the Prague airport. The welcome was diplomatically correct, but noticeably unenthusiastic. The official Czech news agency reports that most of the Soviet and other Warsaw Pact troops will be withdrawn, probably by winter, but from 23 to 70,000 others will stay on. Last September 12th, North Korea staged a news conference that featured the captain of the captured U.S. intelligence ship Pueblo. CBS News has obtained film of that news conference shot by the communist North Koreans and edited by them. Captain Lloyd Booker describes the Pueblo's capture.
On the morning of 23 January, I moved the ship to a point well within the territorial waters of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and stopped at about 1000 and lay to and commenced conducting electronic intelligence gathering activity. We had been in that area for about 2.5 hours when units of the Korean People's Army Navy appeared and ordered us to heave to. I attempted to ignore these orders until a party of Korean soldiers attempted to come aboard, at which time I started my engines and thought to make toward open sea, making a top speed of over 10 knots. The naval units of the Korean People's Army easily overtook my vain efforts to escape and once again ordered me to heave to. I answered by firing my main battery of machine guns at them. In the ensuing gun battle, one of my men was killed and several others wounded. We were captured at a point well within the territorial waters of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea at a point 7.6 miles from the island of Yodo.
That communist film notwithstanding, the United States has insisted that the Pueblo never entered North Korean territorial waters. The Apollo 7 astronauts staged their third televised space show today, but trouble with ground equipment limited the length of the broadcast and impaired the picture quality, as you can see. They used part of the time explaining matter-of-factly how they prepare their food. They were showing here how they mixed orange juice and could let the bag of orange juice float around there in space. A couple of hours later, they briefly fired up the Apollo service propulsion rocket again for a test. Wally Schirra likened the jolt to that received in an amusement park bumper car. The Apollo capsule became an orbiting weather observatory this afternoon as the astronauts flew directly over the eye of Hurricane Gladys and gave ground stations an exact fix on that big storm. Gladys became a hurricane overnight, rushing across western Cuba with 80-mile-per-hour winds. Forecasters say at her present course and speed, Gladys might reach Florida's Tampa-St. Petersburg area by late Thursday. Space officials are watching the hurricane carefully, even if it does not directly threaten the planned landing area for Apollo 7, some 700 miles east of Cape Kennedy. Heavy waves kicked up by the storm could be a severe landing problem. Space officials also are concerned about the big Saturn V standing out on its pad at Merritt Island near the Cape, being readied for December's Apollo 8. They may decide to move it back to its protective hangar. The National Institutes of Health today disclosed development of a German measles vaccine, which in tests so far has proved more than 90% effective in preventing the disease. Officials say it's possible the vaccine could be on the market within a year. German measles, of course, is the primary cause of birth defects in the United States. And while the live vaccine could not be given to women in pregnancy, vaccination of children hopefully would give long-term immunization and eventually eliminate the disease. 3 American pioneers in genetic research today were named joint recipients of the 1968 Nobel Prize in Medicine. They are Professors Robert Holley of Cornell, H. Gobind Khurana of the University of Wisconsin, and biochemist Marshall Nirenberg of the National Heart Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. They will share the $70,000 cash award.
What causes my heartburn, my indigestion?
In your stomach, excess acid may build, and build can cause acid indigestion, heartburn, that burning sensation. But Rolaids, with its exclusive buffering compound, has thousands of absorbent particles. Each consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid, gives fast, lasting relief. Rolaids consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid.
Whose idea was this?
Stop moaning. At least you're losing weight, you glamorous widow.
Oh, sure.
Ben hasn't noticed the new you?
Last date he acted like I had bad breath.
Jogging won't help that. But Listerine will. Listerine kills germs that can cause bad breath. And it lasts for hours.
Nothing like fresh air, is there?
And there's nothing like Listerine Antiseptic. Kills germs, keeps breath fresh for hours.
In Chicago today, Mayor Richard Daley and his police force received both bouquets and brickbats for their handling of disorders accompanying the Democratic Convention. Bob Evans reports.
A civic organization, Citizens of Greater Chicago, honored Mayor Daley today for what they called courageous protection of Chicago during the violence of the Democratic National Convention.
As much as it is our constitutional duty to make sure that the rights of all citizens are protected against those who would do harm to others, it is equally our constitutional duty to see to it that people have the right of petition and assembly, and that no group or individuals in our city are denied these rights. But if any individual or group declare that its intentions are to create violence, to trample on the rights of others by force, then the public must be protected.
But 3 members of the board of directors of the organization resigned in protest over citing the mayor. One board member who submitted resignation in protest, Norman Dolnick.
The behavior of the police and Mayor Daley is a matter of some contention in the city and throughout the country, I should say. There is a grand jury investigation starting. There are hearings before a congressional committee. There are lawsuits involved in this thing, and it is questionable as to whether anyone should be commended or possibly even condemned at this point. But the CGC's award at this time, I think, is totally improper because it puts the CGC in a position of commending the mayor when there's some question as to whether he should be commended.
Mayor Daley was also on the mind of the American Civil Liberties Union, who today announced the publication of a new slick-back magazine entitled Law and Disorder, the Chicago Convention and its Aftermath, filled with pictures and articles by well-known people who were appalled by what happened in Chicago. At the ACLU press conference to announce the new publication, Donald Myra spoke. He had volunteered his services free of charge to edit the magazine.
I think that you, and when you examine the magazine, will agree that in the 50,000 words and in the more than 50 photographs and cartoons, we have done the job. We have presented a view which is fair, honest, and one-sided, because there is really only one right side here.
Attorney General Ramsey Clark today accused Nixon of deliberately misleading Americans on the issue of law and order. Clark's reply to Nixon's campaign attacks on him came in a speech to the Women's National Press Club in Washington.
One reason Mr. Nixon resorts to trigger words and misstatements on the crime issue is that he doesn't know enough about the subject for all of his coaching to talk at length on the merits. Another is that he finds it his style of politics to appeal to fear and hatred and emotionalism, the worst in us, rather than to build constructively with confidence, with goodwill, and with reason. We must state positions on the issues clearly, not fabricate straw men. But the public never sees the issues when Mr. Nixon speaks. Can a man who deliberately misleads be trusted to lead? It is not too late for Mr. Nixon to tell us what he stands for, if anything. We know who he stands against. He tells us every day. But isn't it more important to know what a man stands for than who he stands against? We need a man of vision, of balance and compassion, a builder, not a wrecker, a man with a sense of history, not one who moves from one personal crisis to the next, measuring only what is important to him personally. We need a man who can give us unity and humaneness, a man in whom we can believe.
Come on, Mom, we're late for the game.
I'm not coming. I'm too tired.
Mom, you're always tired.
Are you always tired? Could be iron poor tired blood. You may need Geritol. The great majority of tired people don't feel that way because of iron poor blood, and Geritol won't help them. But millions do have iron poor blood, and you could be tired for that very reason and need Geritol. Just 2 Geritol tablets give you twice the iron in a pound of calf's liver. Geritol iron enters your bloodstream fast, carrying strength throughout your body. For iron-poor, tired blood, take Geritol and feel stronger fast. This is Ralph Bellamy. Your health.
Can't sleep because of simple nervous tension? Take Sominex to enjoy a good night's sleep and a good bright morning, too.
Sominex contains 3 medical ingredients.
Take Sominex tonight and sleep safe and restful. Sleep, sleep, sleep.
Take 2 Sominex tablets and sleep.
The Supreme Court today refused to stop the shipment of 91 Army reservists to Vietnam. The reservists, members of a Boston unit, had charged they were inadequately trained for their duty in the war zone. On the West Coast, however, another military unit has been successful in resisting Vietnam duty. That story from Bill Stout.
Fort Lewis, Washington, for more than 200 units over the past 3 years, the jumping-off place for Vietnam. This is the story of one unit that did not jump off. They call it the 1st of the 18th, 1st Squadron, 18th Armored Cavalry Regiment, a National Guard unit from the Los Angeles area. On paper, one of our best reserve units. The 1st of the 18th was called to active duty May 13th, scheduled to depart for Vietnam in September. Then it was announced the departure date had been pushed back, and then it was announced that the 1st of the 18th would not go to Vietnam at all. The Army's official explanation, the men of the unit were not needed in Vietnam, but their equipment was. However, there are reports that the real reason was many men simply did not want to go to Vietnam and argued that the unit was not ready. These soldiers are members of a committee representing the reluctant troopers.
I would not deny at all that the men were afraid to go to Vietnam. I think everyone is.
With that training. Again, you require the training to accomplish the mission.
Exactly.
With that training.
That's morale, right?
Okay, now
that is morale. Confidence in yourself. At least you have a chance.
So it is clear that some members of the 1st of the 18th did not consider their unit combat ready. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Brainerd, disagrees.
The internal problems aren't as great as they're played up to be. I feel that there's a small factor of the squadron which has caused an awful lot of trouble. However, most of the squadron were resigned to go, and they were resigned to do a good job while they were there.
There is evidence to the contrary. Here, more than 300 members of the unit meet in a pizza parlor in Tacoma. They're discussing a lawsuit challenging their calling. The educational level of this group is perhaps the highest of any Army field unit, an average of more than 2 years of college per man. Still, they do not, for the most part, challenge the war in terms of right or wrong. They're fighting the call-up on legal grounds.
The Vietnam question has been settled by the Supreme Court. It's legal. Our call-up is illegal, we think.
When the suit was filed, 355 men signed up as parties to the action, roughly 35% of the 1,000-man unit. Some soldiers claim their fitness records were doctored to make the unit look better, more combat ready.
Are you saying that you were ordered to falsify records?
Yes, we were ordered to update the records and change things to make them agree.
Some of the records were falsified, but the men admittedly did this themselves so that they wouldn't have to come back and, or they claimed they did this themselves. This has never been proven.
Now, there were 10 men that did this, and there were 10 men that went to the Inspector General during the inspection and made statements to this fact, that we had done this under orders.
Certainly my officers, nor my non-commissioned officers would stand for any nonsense like that. That's, that's just not kosher.
The rebels in the 1st of the 18th have other complaints. They say they passed their Army field test with flying colors only because they had plenty of time to practice for that exam. In reality, they say, typists and clerks were running the tanks. And they say they did not have the special training needed for Vietnam.
You need morale. And this, to me, is one of the best ways to just deplete it.
Well,
you can't convince
an intelligent human being that he is well trained when he's not. You can tell him all day long, but the man is not dumb. He will not believe you.
We say it is the finest trained squadron in the United States Army, and I really believe that, and I know Colonel Rayberry, the boss, does too. And I feel he wouldn't have certified us combat ready if he hadn't thought so.
The 1st of the 18th is a strafe unit, supposedly an elite force with more and better training than other units. Certainly not all the troopers go along with the rebellion. Some are volunteering for Vietnam duty on an individual basis. Some are angry about the publicity.
Why don't you point that thing at somebody else, fella?
Because
in a minute I'm going to shove it down your throat. Just point it at somebody else.
While some feel their squadron has been maligned, there are others who have carried their protest against the call-up to an extreme degree. They've simply disappeared. Some crossed the border to Canada. The Army says the figures on men absent without leave are classified, but there are reports the number is high. These 4 young men are former members of the squadron now living in Vancouver, British Columbia. They left the unit and the country before the Army canceled its plans to send the 1st of the 18th to Vietnam.
The fact is that I can't kill anyone. It's that simple. I don't want to kill anyone, especially with doubt in my mind.
If you could not kill anyone, why did you join a unit where you were out there greasing machine guns and driving tanks around or whatever you were doing?
It used to be a joke.
There you go.
Right.
Just about.
The Guard used to be a joke. You go once a month and you have some beer, you know?
By the fact that we joined the National Guard shows that we do not want to spend 2 years in the Army. We don't want to go through the Army rigmarole, live the Army life for 2 years. And so what we were doing, in effect, is taking the 6-month thing, hoping that nothing would happen in the meantime, and joining the National Guard as a draft dodge.
Gamble.
As a draft dodge?
As a draft dodge.
I think the problem is, of course, that they were going to Vietnam. There was quite a few that, of course, just don't want to go to Vietnam because they're scared, they're hesitant, they don't really understand combat, they've never been to combat, they don't know of the boredom and the small amount of firefights that are actually attributable to combat. I think that this is just basically a case that they were scared.
Sure, everyone has fear of death. So what? I mean, like if the cause is good enough, okay, you're willing to take that to handle the fear and do what you have to do. But for a colonel to...
Colonel Brainerd won't be dying. He'll be sitting back 50 miles behind the lines.
The colonel has a great deal of this physical courage, the idea, go to Vietnam and stand up in front of the rifles and be a man. That isn't my idea of courage.
But it is for the colonel. It definitely is.
Of course it is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I say, that's not my idea of courage, so don't take me with you.
The Army ordered up the 1st of the 18th, just as it would any other unit. But the 1st of the 18th turned out to be something else again. To a great extent, a bunch of civilians challenging the system. And once on active duty, the unit seems to have fallen apart, at least in terms of morale. The question is, if there are others like it, how many? Bill Stout, CBS News, Fort Lewis, Washington.
And that's the way it is. Wednesday, October 16th, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Who will lead America in the next 4 years? Join Walter Cronkite and America's most widely followed news team for the important story, Election Night '68, here on CBS.